right, this is close enough. The call to circle up is how we know that it's time to start a higher ground rehearsal. In a circle, not unlike that one. Wow, that was not how I thought that was going to go. We start off every rehearsal by getting in a circle so that we can come together, focus in, and get ready for the work that we're about to do together. At the end of every circle, we cap it off with a prayer. Anybody can lead the prayer, and one day, in a circle, one of our cast members from the elementary school volunteered. So we all grabbed hands, closed our eyes, bowed our head, and he started off just like you'd imagine. Dear Heavenly Father, and off we went. It wasn't until we were most of the way through when we realized that we were also getting a bonus social studies lesson. When he added, and please let us pray for the folks who died on the Titanic when it sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And without missing a beat, head still bowed, eyes still closed, and in complete seriousness, the deacon from the church across town adds, they're still down there. Welcome to Higher Ground. Higher Ground is a community arts organization based in Harlan County, Kentucky. They focus on community growth and connectedness through arts and storytelling. One of their key programs is the creation of locally made new plays. Higher Ground follows a model that is a variation on traditional scripted theater called community performance. Community performance, rather than starting with a published script, starts with a gathering or a series of gatherings. Community members come together, they share their stories. Those stories are then recorded and compiled into a collection. The collection is then used as the source material for the development of a semi-fictionalized script, which is then rehearsed and performed for friends, family, and neighbors. The scripts tend to tackle themes that are topical, but often difficult, right? Things like the impact of the opioid crisis on Appalachia. The idea is that we're able to use them as a jumping off point, a way to push folks to talk about those things that are hard to talk about. And to support the work of the local artists, they'll bring in professional theater makers from out of town to help with some of the structural and technical elements. And that's how I got there. See, when I graduated college, I was looking for a job. I wasn't terribly picky, preferably something that had to do with my major, which happened to be theater, not pre-law or pre-medicine, which were my grandmother's suggestions. So you could say that I felt like I had a little something to prove, namely that I could survive on my own as an adult with a career in theater. So when somebody offered me a 3-month paid gig, I jumped at it. Which is how I found myself one early August morning, white-knuckling my steering wheel as I drove down the side of a mountain. I hadn't seen a highway in a hot minute. And the longer I drove, the more I was sure that I was headed somewhere that you don't end up on accident. But eventually, the road leveled out, I started to regain circulation in my fingers, and I looked out for the first time on the valley that cuts through Harlan County. And I had a feeling that I was on the right track. See, if you'd asked me at the beginning of that journey how I felt, I'd have said that I felt great. I knew what I was getting myself into. I got that degree. I was a professional theater artist. I knew how to make theater, and I knew how to tell a story. Funny thing about stories, we often think about the ones that we tell other people, or the ones that other people tell us. But we tend to forget about the stories that we tell ourselves. Come to find out, I was telling myself an awful lot of stories, which I now know means that there was a whole world of things that I didn't know. Like how I didn't know that a backhoe is not like a garden hoe. It is not the kind of hand prop that you put on a table backstage. Fun fact, it's a piece of heavy construction equipment. Or how I didn't know that Higher Ground wasn't typical theater. See, typical theater has auditions. Some folks are selected, others are let go. Better luck next time. Higher Ground has auditions to see what roles people want to play or what parts they're suited for. But no one is turned away, which usually results in having people playing the same role on different nights. Typical theater has a schedule. You come to rehearsal every time you're called. Higher Ground has a schedule, but you come to rehearsal when you can, which sometimes means that the entire company is on stage for the first time together on opening night. Typical theater has a script, and you stick to it. Higher Ground has a script, but sometimes it can be a little bit more of a suggestion. We're here to tell a story and make it good, which is exactly what happened on my first Higher Ground show, their 4th production, Fog Lights. For Fog Lights, I was working primarily as a stage manager. I was in charge of running rehearsals, keeping track of calendars, staying with the show from the very first day past closing night. Officially, part of my job was making sure that the show was the same every time we performed it, which is a very typical expectation for very typical theater. But as we all now know, Higher Ground is not typical theater. Let's take a deeper look. So, for example, there was a scene in Fog Lights that featured 2 guys talking about their kids. First guy was telling a story about his daughter. She's given him some grief, typical parenting woes. Second guy, his name's Mr. Lookgood. He responds with a story about his son, Junior. Junior was a barber, and he'd had a shop in town, but he was having difficulty making ends meet. So Junior decides that he's going to go off and move to Indianapolis. Big city, lots of people, better prospects. Junior heads up to Indianapolis, he makes some friends. One night, Junior and his friends are at a party, and a fight breaks out. Junior gets caught in the middle of it. He gets in the middle of the crossfire, and he dies from gunshot wounds. He never makes it home. We had 2 people alternating the role of Mr. Lookgood. Benny learned the words as they were written on the page. Rutland did not. Rutland was so far off script that during rehearsals, I started trying to write down what he was saying so that I could keep up. And from my training, I knew that that was wrong. I knew that we were supposed to be following the script, and I knew that it was my responsibility as a stage manager to fix it. And one day, I was talking to another company member, venting my frustrations, and they stopped me. And they said, that's Rutland's story. Rutland had shared that story with the record. His son left home and never came back. Every night when he was on stage, and he said it was hard, but we made it work. He wasn't going off script. He was sharing something deeply personal with all of us. And suddenly this was bigger than words on a page, right? This was bigger than putting on a play. And if I'd kept telling myself some story about the right way to make theater, I never would have known. And that's when I started to learn that maybe I think I know more than I actually know. And there's great value in taking a moment to stop and listen. A few years later, a Harm Reduction Coalition reaches out to Higher Ground to commission a play. They're looking for a way to promote conversation in their community about the possibility of opening a needle exchange, a location where people who use intravenous drugs can take their used needles and exchange them for clean ones. People think they know an awful lot about substance misuse. You'll hear things like, harm reduction was just a way for people to justify continuing to use drugs, or addiction is a personal moral failing. And a core tenet of Higher Ground is not to tell people what they should do or should think, just to offer information and a fresh perspective. So in needlework, we focus on Sweet Betty. Betty's a regular neighbor. She tells funny stories. She hosts the knitting circle. She takes care of her grandkid. And Betty's oldest daughter was 191 days sober when she died of hepatitis, which she had contracted while in active addiction. Betty wants to do everything in her power to prevent that from happening to another family. So she starts an unsanctioned needle exchange out of the back of her house. In the final scene, Betty is arrested. And her granddaughter comes on stage and asks the audience directly, "What do you think should happen?" Following the play, there was a Q&A between the audience members and experts in healthcare and social work and law enforcement from the local community. A chance to verbally process the events of the play, to ask questions, discuss real-world implications, share experiences, listen, maybe learn something. Originally, needlework was scheduled to be performed twice in the fall of 2017. Once in Harlan County, and once in the neighboring town of Pikeville. But people were listening, and they were sharing, and requests for needlework kept coming. The final performances were in April of 2019 in Nelsonville, Ohio, nearly 300 miles away and almost 2 years after the original performances. In the end, hundreds of people were asked the question, what do you think should happen? And they had the opportunity to ask themselves, what if I think I know more than I actually know? See, it can feel really straightforward to break life down into the things we know and the things we don't. But it's not quite that simple. It seems to me that there are the things that we know, maybe. There are the things that we don't know, surely. There are the things that we think we know, and there are the things that we don't know that we don't know. The things that we think we know are the stories that we tell ourselves, the ways that we fill in the gaps. These are the things that, the hunches, the logical leap that helps you answer a Jeopardy clue, or the assumption we make about somebody else based on the clothes that they wear, or the car that they drive, or the podcast that they listen to. And if the things that we think we know are the stories that we tell ourselves, then the things that we don't know are just the stories that we haven't heard yet. Let's put it into practice. Step 1, we acknowledge that we think we know more than we actually know. And once we can accept that, we can turn down the volume on what we think. When you turn down the volume, you can hear better. You're open to the possibilities of the things that you don't know, that you don't know. And when you can listen to these stories that you haven't heard yet with curiosity, well, that's when you learn something. When I was first offered the position on the out-of-town team for Fog Lights, the project's lighting designer said to me, "It's unlike anything you've ever done. It may be unlike anything you do again, but if you love it, and I think you will, it will change your life." And he was right. See, when we constantly refill our minds with the things that we think that we know, we rob ourselves of that opportunity to hear and to listen and to learn. People are not as simple as the tales that we spin or the assumptions that we make. And there is a whole world of things that we don't know, just outside of our awareness. But we have a choice. We can choose to keep telling ourselves the same story over and over again. Or we can choose to embrace that unknown, to embrace that ambiguity, the complexity, the humanity. Might just find something bigger on the other side. Who knows? Give it a shot. See what happens. Maybe you'll love it. Maybe it'll change your life. Thank you.